Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that Senegal is very committed to Pan-Africanism. I was lucky during my student years to study the Pan-Africanist movement in Paris between the two world wars. And I realized that Marcus Garvey's people came to the shore of Senegal back in 1922. They were already here, and we had Garvey militants in Rufisque and in Saint-Louis of Senegal. They were already working to unite our people, and his journal, The Negro World, was circulated. Of course, it was not allowed by the colonial rulers, but they did their best to work for the expansion of Pan-Africanism in Senegal. And then we had, I think this, I don't know if it's our merit or just historical accident, but Senegal was the center of what they call Francophone or French West Africa. So Dakar was the capital of Francophone West Africa, and Saint-Louis and Dakar were already playing a big role in hosting all Africans visiting this part of the world, and of course African Americans, African Caribbeans, Afro-Brazilians interested in connecting with the motherland. So for that reason, all our representatives in the French Parliament were there on behalf of the African people. You know, from Blaise Diagne, Lamine Gueye, before Lamine Galandou, Lamine Gueye, Senghor, and more importantly, on the side of intellectuals and scholars, Cheikh Anta Diop was a true hero of our people from the beginning. Back in the 40s, he wrote this piece wondering the conditions, the preconditions for African Renaissance. So I was surprised one day in the One African Union meeting when someone said that when we recently launched the concept of African Renaissance, and I said, I'm so sorry, it's not a fight for who said it first or who did it first, but Cheikh Anta Diop truly deserved the respect and consideration for having launched the concept of African Renaissance in 1948. So I gave the reference of the article and all the information, and then I think it kind of changed the mind of some of our friends in the African Union movement. And since then, Senegal has been struggling next to one African leader, Kwame Nkrumah, who is the other hero of our cause and the cause of black people and the African people in general. Nkrumah did a wonderful job, but like all prophets, they are not well understood, you know, and then a plot was mounted against Nkrumah because people knew in the West that the true hope of Africa was in the hands of Nkrumah. And his speech in 1963 Addis Ababa meeting is historical, and all people of African descent and people of who believe in this continent should read and memorize, you know, the speech of Nkrumah. We'll never have such a striking and clearly expressed vision for our people. Nkrumah understood that the West, while they were leaving Africa, they had a wonderful time bomb left behind, which is the Balkanization of the African continent. They managed to have, even like Francophone West Africa was integrated for 60 years in one territory, one administration, which is a proof that we can get along, we Africans, contrary to what they tell people and what they teach to our people. So before leaving, they realized that if they leave those people, these African people, with all their natural resources, with all their historical background, you know, with all their powerful spiritual force that these people will either lead the world quickly or become a world powerhouse. So they had to break us down. And Balkanization doesn't mean anything but breaking Africa in small, tiny, non-viable entities. Today we have Senegal, 200,000 square kilometers. You have the Gambia next to Senegal, visiting Senegal. You have Mauritania, Mali, the two Guineas. And you have all type of state that they just, it's like they were drawing on a map, you know, like they did in Berlin. Just drawing a map and then say, okay, let's call this Sierra Leone, let's call this Senegal. So that's why in our vision here, is being lucky to have a president who is a true Pan-Africanist, President Abdoulaye Wade, and who wrote this book about a destiny for Africa. We are lucky to be able to speak our mind on the fact that the colonial rulers knew exactly what they were doing. And the problem basically is no longer the colonial rulers, because they are half gone. You know, they withdraw while leaving part of most of their interests behind. And then they have African people speaking on their behalf, so they don't need to be here. They have our people representing their interests. Sometimes I'm appalled and totally shocked to see in the African Union framework, African people standing and saying that they don't understand why we should unite. We are totally different. We are not the same people, you know. We don't have any historical, cultural background. Why should we create the United States of Africa? Why should we create, you know, a federation of African states? Of course, because of diplomatic reasons, I cannot tell them, you're doing a wonderful job on behalf of the colonial masters, but that's what I believe, you know, that's what I believe. They're not speaking on behalf of African people. So the way I state it is, when I listen to some of our brothers and sisters here, I'm absolutely convinced that they're lagging behind our people, because our people are fundamentally united. It is our government that are running behind our people because they don't understand that when you put 10 African people in a room like this, I challenge anyone to get in the room and to say, who is the Tanzanian, who is the Senegalese, who is the Malian, who is the Guinean? How can you know who is who? Because we have one common identity, we are Africans, period. So that's one part of the issue coming from the African side. Now, the other side is extremely important to us. I think that we are now fully aware that, the great Chinese leader, Mao, used to say that he cannot understand why human beings have 2 feet and they walk with 1 foot sometimes, 1 foot. You know, if you walk on 1 foot and you have 2 feet, it's a problem. And that's what we're doing when we ignore our diaspora. It just doesn't make sense. History has done what it has done to our people. But Marcus Garvey has said it very eloquently and the best way possible, that we have 2 types of Africans, Africans at home and Africans abroad. So for that reason, we are all Africans. And it is extremely important for us to reconnect with our diaspora. If you don't do it, it's a suicidal move. And today, we are lucky to have our people in the Caribbean, in Brazil. Brazil is called the 2nd largest homeland of African people. But are they visible, those African people? Are they given their share? I don't want, because of diplomatic reasons, get into some details of what I truly feel deep inside of me when I go to Brazil. But one day I was invited as the Foreign Minister of Senegal to go and visit the Foreign Minister of Brazil. So we had a meeting. We were 4 or 5 Senegalese people on one side, and in front of us we had 23 officials from the government of Brazil, all 23 white Brazilians. So I was, of course, when we left, I asked the question as diplomatically as possible, but I was shocked. I was shocked because when I sat one day with our brother, the Minister of Culture, Gilberto Gil, I asked him, I said, it seems that you are like half-half, you know, half African people and half non-African people. And he said, no, it's not true. Brazil population is kind of You know, it's one of the best kept secrets in the world. We are not 150 million, we are 180 million. And among the 180 million, we have 100 million African people. And now, 100 million African people, it's a good news for us. You know, good news for us because we were decimated for 400 years. Our people were killed. You know, I have a great African American friend who was a political analyst and a historian. He used to say that the Atlantic Ocean is the largest cemetery in the world. Sure. How many of our people were thrown, you know, over the slave ships, you know, going to America and going to the Caribbean. So, if you put all that together, we need our diaspora. We need our diaspora, and then one day I said in the African Union that we should all meditate and reflect on what Malcolm X said once in 1963. I think it was after the Alabama church burning. He said that he cannot understand the new African leaders. That when our people are brutalized in South Africa, they go to the UN and they march. But when our people are brutalized in the United States or in the African diaspora, he doesn't see much of complaint from African leaders. And he said, next time we do it, I will take you myself to the UN and I will complain against African leaders. I thought it was so beautiful that that statement should be circulated to all African people and African leaders today. That Africans in the diaspora are not begging for recognition, are not begging for love from their lost brothers and sisters. They're just saying that they are part of this beautiful land, this motherland called Africa, and they're just asking their fair share of this African continent. And they want to share the fate and destiny of the African people, and they want to contribute to African Renaissance and to rebuilding the continent, because this continent has to be rebuilt. Today, with almost 800 million human beings living in Africa. Spain with 40 million people. Spain, which was a developing country back in the 70s. Spain today has its GDP is larger than the whole continent of Africa if you put aside South Africa. France is a small country, after all. And France has 3 times the GDP of the whole continent of Africa, altogether. It's totally unacceptable. We have today the human resources. God has, you know, I say it sometimes jokingly, but I mean it truly. When God, you know, saw what was happening to African people throughout history, he decided to put his hand on 1/3 of the world natural resources which are in Africa to protect those resources. So today, despite all the pillage, 400 years of human and natural resource pillage, Africa still controls 1/3 of the world reserves, 1/3. So 800 million people, 1/3 of natural resources, and among the 800 million people, at least half or more than half of those people are less than 20 years old, which is a great asset for our people. Africa can contain China 3 times, like the territory of China can fit 3 times in the continent of Africa. You can put the continent of China in Africa, put the United States, put most of the European continent, put some Asian countries, and still have some territory left. So now when they tell us we are overpopulated, that we have too many, you know, after they decimated our people during slavery and colonization, now they come to tell us, basically what they're saying is that 800 million African, it's a threat to the rest of the world because we are Africans. So that's the problem, but it's not a demographic problem. China is 1.3 billion human beings, and they fit in a territory that is like 3 times smaller than the continent of Africa. So Africa actually was depopulated. So it means that they took part of most of our, not most, but they took, you know, important part of our population away. So we should not be scared of making African babies, you know. The problem is, of course, to make African babies, but to feed those babies too. We have to be responsible, both men and women, you know, to not run away from our responsibility. It's easy to be a father, you know, or a mother, but it's not easy to be a parent. We have to be a parent to those Africans because they are not born in the best conditions. They have to struggle to make it, and they have to be the best among the best to survive. So knowing that, we have a duty toward our African population. The other point that I wanted to raise is that African Renaissance means a strong cultural and historical renaissance. I spoke about the political renaissance, Kwame Nkrumah 1963, all the process of the African Union right now. Before I go back to the historical and cultural part, I just want to inform you that Senegal was lucky to elect in the year 2000 a president who has been, who is an Nkrumahist, who believed in Kwame Nkrumah for like the last 45 years of his life. He's truly, fully committed to Pan-Africanism. He knows the work of Sylvester William, of Marcus Garvey, of George Patmore. He knows the work of Du Bois in the US. He has read all those, you know, great Pan-Africanist leaders, and that's where Africa is truly indebted to its children that are living outside of Africa. Pan-Africanism, 1900, the first conference of Pan-Africanism, was initiated and led by Africans living abroad. You know, Sylvester William from Trinidad and Tobago, who lived, you know, in the US for a while and then went to London. Those are the brothers and sisters who created the Pan-Africanist movement. So if today we are talking, there's a renaissance of the Pan-Africanist movement, there's a renewal. We're talking about a United States of Africa as a concept. And in Accra, Ghana, back in July, we had a conference of African head of state proposed by Senegal that at last African leaders should sit down and address the issue of African unity and United States of Africa. So President Kufuor of Ghana, back in January 2007, called the Senegal's proposal the Grand Debate on the union government. So that's how we had that Grand Debate on the union government in Accra in July. And 41 head of state or head of delegation took the floor to make a statement about their country's vision of African unity. Now, before the meeting ended, the Western media had decided that it was a huge failure. So I told them, you were formatted mentally for the failure of African people. Because if we had come out of the meeting and said, we want the United States of Africa in 2-3 years, you would have said, these people are crazy. They have no institutions, they're not ready, but they're calling for the United States of Africa. Now, when we say, no, we will put a process in motion, we'll study the concept, we'll define what we mean by union government, the areas of competence of the union government, the relationship between the union government and regional economic communities, how to finance the union government. And then when we say in our Accra Declaration, we all agree to accelerate the political and economic integration of the African continent, including the formation of a union government. And when we say that integration should keep in mind the African diaspora. And then when we say the ultimate goal of the African Union is the United States of Africa, the white Western media decided that it was a failure, a huge failure of African people. And then some of our people helped them. They wrote pieces saying that Accra was a disaster. Now, it's a disaster because we are putting a process to unite our people, and that we know all the obstacles that we have in front of us, and to have 41 out of 50 delegations take the floor, to me, is a huge success. And we are proud of what we achieved in Accra. And in like around 11 o'clock when I leave this meeting, we have 40 university teachers waiting for me to discuss a report on the union government, the Senegal's contribution. You know, they are not there because they are university teachers, but they are there because they are Pan-Africanists. And they believe in the cause of African unity and in the cause of a union government as an urgency for the African continent. So Another topic that may be of great interest to you is that Senegal has proposed in the year 2004, actually 2003 and 2004, to the African Union to make a major correction in our Constitutive Act. In Lomé, 2000, July 2000, President Wade first statement before the African Union leaders, because that was his first African Union summit as the new head of state of Senegal. He said our Constitutive Act has like 3 major flaws. One is you totally ignore African women. Second, you totally ignore the African diaspora. Number 3, you ignore not only the African intellectuals, and then number 4, yeah, so 4 flaws. Number 4, you are not ready for a continental government. We're still talking about an administrative commission called the AU Commission. And you say you're setting up a commission, removing all the power, executive powers. So those people will be handicapped, they will not be able to do their job. And we will go into a crisis very soon. What happened today? African Union is in a huge crisis. President Konare does not want to continue. The commissioners are totally unable to do their job. So we have reached that stage where Africans realize we need a continental executive body to run the continent in areas that we have agreed to put together. And then President Wade proposed that we have, regarding the intellectuals, a conference of intellectuals from Africa and the diaspora to catch up with the mistake that we made not to have associated our intellectuals from Africa and from the diaspora to the process of building the African Union. So you remember we had this conference in Dakar, 2004, and then we had a conference in Brazil, actually Dakar, May 2005, and Brazil, July 2007. So, and that conference we want it to come like every 2 years, every other year, once in Africa, once in the diaspora, once in Africa and once in the diaspora. So intellectuals now are challenged to take part to the African Renaissance, political renaissance, and helping build African unity. Now, regarding African women, President Wade proposed, and President Beki helped him get that proposal through, that we go for the parity. Like African Union Commission is the only structure, leading structure in the world that has 5 men, 5 women. Exact 50%, 50%. And we are trying now to trickle that down to all other institutions of the African Union and to all our countries. And today, to be honest, it's not Senegal, but it's Rwanda, which is doing a wonderful job in promoting our sisters, African women, and giving them their rightful place in leading our countries. And Rwanda has 48% of parity rate in promoting African women. So President Kagame deserves respect for his understanding that we cannot build Africa without the most important component of Africa, which is African women. And the last point of our president's first statement was the African diaspora. So to just take care of the problem, he proposed, I think it was 2 or 3 meetings later, we proposed that the African diaspora be considered the 6th region of the continent. You know, the first time I made the statement that we should consider the African diaspora the 6th region of the continent, people were shocked, they were surprised, and they thought it was something totally ludicrous, something unintelligent, and then they wanted explanation. Because in their mind, we have West Africa, East Africa, Central Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa. So now how can you call the 6th region the African diaspora? So we had to give some explaining that the Caribbean states, Brazil today, African American communities, Africans in Canada, Africans in Europe, they are not only strong and important communities, but they are African people, and they will remain African people for the rest of their life. And they will be African people until the end of history. So we have to find a way to give them their rightful place in rebuilding this continent, number one. Number two, we have a huge interest in having the expertise of African American, African Brazilian, African Canadian, Africans in the Caribbean. That expertise, we need it here in Africa, which they recognize as their motherland. The problem is, do we recognize them as sons and daughters of Africa? And then, when you say, we say it goes more beyond a symbolic act. We are not just saying, let them feel African by calling them Sixth Region. No. We are saying that we want them to be part of us, part of the decision-making process. And I think that part will be of interest to you. Because in January, if you check the agenda of the African Union Head of States meeting, President Wade has instructed me to send once again a request that we adopt a resolution allowing the diaspora to have a permanent representative in the meetings of African Head of States, where that representative, even if it's in a rotation, once from the Caribbean, once from the US, once from Brazil, once extra, that African diasporan leader will take the floor like any other African leader. You know, he or she will represent our people from the diaspora and will be allowed to be a full member, not an observer or a guest, but a full member of our deliberation and be able to take the floor and state the views of our people in the diaspora. So I hope we will have all the support we need in Addis Ababa. We will lobby for it, we will do the diplomatic groundwork, and we hope that this will be adopted without many difficulties. And we hope to, we have all the rights to believe that it's going to go through, because if you remember in November, we had this diaspora meeting in South Africa. I think President Becky is doing also a good job recognizing that African Americans, African Caribbeans, and so on have helped free South Africa. They were integral part of the fight to free Africa from apartheid. So today there is a recognition, and South Africa is with us in this struggle to recognize the role and contribution of the diaspora. So they called the ministerial meeting. Senegal was there, very supportive of South Africa's effort. And then we'll have a summit of head of state. But what I urge you to do is that, I don't think it's saying something bad about, you know, some of our colleagues, but we should not accept, you know, what I call double talks. You know, like, people want the diaspora to know that today they are welcomed and they are invited to be part of this process. But at the same time, some people are still very scared, and some people are not ready to go all the way. So you need to identify countries in Africa that are ready to go all the way and back those countries and give them all the support they need. When I raised the issue of dual citizenship for Africans in the diaspora, and when I said that Senegal was ready to study the question, and I have already, under the instruction of President Abdoulaye Wade, given the diplomatic passports of Senegal to some scholars from you know, Africans in the diaspora, and that we are ready even to go even further. You know, some of our constitutions to prevent dual citizenship is like Africans who wanted to be French or British, and then be also, you know, they do not renounce to their privilege during the colonial time, and at the same time they want to have dual, the national citizenship. We have kind of closed our constitution against dual citizenship. But now that the issue of the diaspora is very clear in our mind, then we have to find a way to change this, saying that an African who was born in Senegal, who goes to France and become a French citizen, and then come back to be also a Senegalese citizen, we are against. But an African who is born in the diaspora, who is an African diasporan, a diasporan African in the Caribbean, in the US, in Canada, in Brazil, if they request a dual citizenship, it should be given consideration. I think we should change our laws to adjust to that reality. Well, if we have the United States of Africa, then I think the issue is resolved. But before we get there, let's try to make African Americans feel at home, African Caribbean, African Brazilian, when they come to Africa. President Wade, we have discussed the issue. I think we will try to put some big step forward on that issue, the issue of visa for Africans in the diaspora. If they are to be the sixth region, and if Senegal wants to maintain the initiative and the leadership on the issue, we should we should get rid of visa for Africans from the diaspora. It is very difficult to understand that a French man or a British man can come to Senegal without a visa, but African American or African Canadian or African Afro-Brazilian have to go and get a visa. So the only problem is we have to make sure that, for instance, in Brazil, if we get rid of the visa for Afro-Brazilian, how do we treat the other Brazilians? So, but that, our legal advisors will think about a way to go around the difficulty. But something that was already said to our police officers at the airport, and I hope they apply it. And every time I was informed, sometimes I drove my car straight to the airport because we are in Africa. Sometimes we have to take care of the problem that way. President Wade has given strong instructions that all people of African descent and people of the African continent who come to Dakar and realize that they did not secure their visa should be allowed in, and then the visa issue will be taken care of later. I hope we find a way to make people understand why we're doing this. It is extremely important to us. Finally, one big problem that we have is we don't trust ourselves enough. We have too many scarce injuries from history and our recent history, the last 500 years. People are trying to identify African people with the suffering of slavery, of colonization. And then before slavery and colonization, for them, it was total darkness in Africa. There was nothing. And some of our people believe that. So all the work of Cheikh Anta Diop, should be taken fully into account. Today, some white European scholars are now struggling to get the legacy of the Egyptian people as being their legacy. Jacques Attali, who is a great French intellectual, I used to read his books like in 2 days, because he writes like books of 800 pages. So I had to find a way to just concentrate and get rid of the book quickly because he's a brilliant mind. But now I have serious doubts and I want to write him a letter. Because I read one of his books, his last book. He writes like 1 book a year or 2 books. He's very prolific, in writing. So the man who wrote a book lately called The History of the Future. So he started recounting the history of humankind. And when he arrived to Egypt, he said Ramses was the first Western prince in the history of humanity. So I found it very interesting because if Europe was in a state of barbarism, if Europe had no civilization 4,000 years before Jesus, how can a European leave Europe to come to Africa to build, the Egyptian and the pharaonic civilization? It's just a total nonsense. And I hope, being an intellectual, he will recognize his mistake. And I asked Senegalese scholars specialized in antiquity and the history of Egypt to write him a comprehensive letter and ask him to correct his mistake. Because to call Ramses a Western prince, the first Western prince in the history of humankind, that's how he said it. And then I closed the book at that page. Since then, I have a problem to go back and finish the book, but I should finish the book and go beyond my anger, So we need to know our history. We need to know who we are and what we have achieved. But then history cannot be also a kind of refuge, like an area where we go to be romantically assessing the history of Africa and then forget that we have problems today that we have to tackle. Now, if our ancestors were able to build pyramids that people cannot still explain, in the logic of the state of science and mathematics and architecture at the time, how did they build those pyramids? We have all kinds of speculative thoughts about those pyramids. If our ancestors were able to achieve that, why Africans today cannot produce, even needles? cannot produce tires, you know, in our countries? Why do we have to buy everything from the West and today from China, from India? Why can't we reconnect with that beautiful knowledge of our ancestors, of our past, and be creative and be pharaonic again? You know, have those big projects and rebuild the African continent. If we did it once and we did it 4,000 years ago, why can't we do it today? So we have to believe in African Renaissance. We have to believe that we have everything we need to succeed. Now, one last point is what I call the revisionist work, which is saying that Africa is to blame for slavery, Africa is to blame for being colonized and things like that. So our people should be extremely careful. This is the new divide, because they feel the new motion of African people coming together. They know that we are struggling to go beyond all our personal own issues to rebuild our fundamental unity as African people and to build the United States of Africa. For that reason now, you see European historians saying, let's be honest, slavery was not mainly, you know, the responsibility of Europe, it was also the responsibility of Africa. Now, when the French people were occupied by the German Nazi, we were told historically that more than 60% of the French kind of agreed with the situation. 40% or less decided to enter into what called resistance. Now today, because they won the war, thank God they won the war against the Nazi, and we are very proud that our fathers, my father was there, fighting for freedom. I don't think he got the recognition he deserved for that, but that's not a problem. He's very happy that he contributed in defeating Nazism. But today, when you read the books talking about the war, Second World War, they will tell that all the French people were resistant. You know, a few of them were like, you know, collaborators, some woman dating the Nazi officers or something, but everybody else was resistant, which is not true, which is not true at all. But when you win, you write history as you wish. And now they're trying to convince us. Many of us, I'm not alone, I know many other people. I have ancestors that I know by name who were killed because they were fighting slavery in the northern part of Senegal. One of them, Bokar Khan, you know, people know him, he was a resistant. And he actually burned some villages in my region there in the north, because he took it as far as saying whoever even shakes the hand of a white man is a dead person. He burned villages and he did everything to stop, you know, the slavery process. So now, if later his grandson is called a collaborator of, you know, the slave trade, it's totally unfair, totally unjust. So I'm saying that every time a people is victim of aggression, some people internally are collaborators, but they are usually, generally speaking, the minority. And what President Wade said is very important. The history of slavery is not the history of the enslavement of black African people. It's the history of resistance of African people against enslavement and injustice. Our people struggle until this day, they're struggling. And you know, they tried with everyone and people were dying, but they tried with our people and we are still around. We are still around. It means that we resisted. Our women resisted. Our men struggled, you know. We did everything that was humanly possible to be here today and to be here still talking. And what they did to us, they do it to Europeans, to Asians. Many of those people would have totally disappeared from the face of the earth. But African people are still there, strong and still motivated, still believing in history and still confident that we can change things around. So it's time of unity. Refuse revisionism. Refuse people who want to change our history. And white people, you know, I'm sorry to speak that language, that is not very diplomatic. You know, white historians are not just allowed to write the history of Africa and African people. They are not just allowed. We respect some of, you know, they had some great, you know, freedom fighters, human rights advocates, you know, some of them fought against slavery. We recognize that. We are not we are not people who have no sense of gratitude. Yeah, we do recognize some people, but it was not the majority. And then I truly think it's an offense to see some white historians from Europe or from America decide to speak on behalf of black people, of African people, and to tell us exactly what our history is. It's not acceptable. So we have to resist that. So I'm saying it's time of cultural resistance, time of economic initiatives. Your business people in the US, in Brazil, everywhere, they should find connection with African businesses, and the Black Empowerment movement in South Africa, and before that in the US, in the Caribbean. We have to economically build our countries, and then political unification of Africa in its diaspora, and then of course the three combined, but social also, social. We have to respect our women. It is time for black people to respect our women. I'm always surprised by the huge contradiction on black men when they say the most important person in my life. You can finish the sentence, my mother. So their mother is almost their God. They worship their mother. But then they don't worship their wife, they don't respect their sisters, and their female colleague is not acceptable. If we have such a huge respect and love for our mothers, we have to share it and to transpose, to take that respect and that love to our sisters, to our wives, to our women, to our, it is absolutely urgent that we not be identified with abusers and people who do not respect their women. It's time to end that part of our bad reputation. You see, I'm not saying that everything is wonderful because we are black people. I'm saying that we do have our own issues and we do have to address those issues. When I speak about those topics, I talk and talk and talk, so it's time to stop. I hope part of the message got through, despite, not the language problem. I tried my best. But I hope, the positive vibrations of a brother who loves you dearly and who believes that we can do a lot together, that you got those vibrations, and that you will be at the rendezvous of African Renaissance. Thank you very much. The best thing that happens to us is to have that debate. What is the political project of the African Union? Where are we heading? Where are we going? Why are we together? Because when they keep the model of the European Union, it's a totally different story. African Union started with all African states. The European Union started with 2 states, 5 states, 6, 12, and so on, until they are now 27. So they went, step by step. But we went from the bottom, from the top, and now we have to deal with the down up, or up down approach. We have to reconcile some of those issues. And then the European Union, they were almost industrial powers when they got to that union issue. And the European Union Commission can make decisions. The Commissioner for Development, he has his own budget, he makes decisions. The African Union Commissioner for Trade was not even involved in the trade battles of the African continent about the World Trade Organization issues, about the fight for against subsidies of the West. She was not even involved because people don't think she's important, and she's our Commissioner for Trade. So we have so many issues and contradictions, and I hope that our leaders will understand that the world belongs to those big entities. People say that in 10, 15 years, you have 4 new superpowers. Of course, the US, but China, India, and Brazil. 3 out of those 4 are federations, federation of states. Brazil is a federation, India is a federation, the United States is a federation, and China is a territorial and a demographic power. So Africa, if you want to be part of that new world coming up, we need to unite. Senegal or the Gambia, frankly have no weight, no significance sitting with China and negotiating, We have like 3 billion as our national budget. You know, the city, when I was in China last week, the city of Shanghai has 8, you know, the city of Shanghai, the mayor's office, has like 8 times the budget of Senegal, you know. A small, you know, just a budget of, and it's not even their global budget, because most of the budget goes to the, you know, federal, the big state of China. But just, you know, to do some basic, you know, paying salaries and stuff, they have 8 times the budget of Senegal. I was in Ohio State University. When I arrived, I asked for the budget of the university. It was twice the budget of Senegal and 3 times the budget of Mali. And so, you know, we can be what we are and just be nice folks and eat our fish and rice and survive and have some nice yusundur and babamal for the rest of our lives. Or we can have ambitions to have our yusundur and babamals and then to be, you know, important countries in the world by uniting, by having the United States of Africa. About Secretary, that Secretary was saying that to build a Pan-Africanist you know, state is not necessarily, you know, it's not a matter of getting the speed. Rather build it like, you know, step by step and take time to do the right things. And then he was wondering if a Pan-Africanist state should be under socialism or capitalism. So my answer was that I read the book, I have a brochure by Secretary called For the United States of Africa. My impression was that Secretary was rather saying that we need to speed up the process, precisely because each year that we lose in the process is devastating for us. You consolidate, you strengthen national sovereignties. Gambia, Senegal, Guinea now are recognized international entities, national entities, which are represented at the United States, which has their own ambassadors, that have their own national flag, and it is becoming more and more difficult to get those countries to agree to abandon partially or totally their sovereignty to build a United States of Africa. So Secretary was saying, you who are against the United States of Africa, you are telling us that we should build solid foundation before we build the, you know, the roof. He's saying now, you cannot be building foundation for thousands of years. It is time to put the roof, which is a continental executive, a continental government. So my feeling was Secretary was rather on the side of people who want to speed up. And as I said, the problem is Africa has like 1,500 ministers, 2,500 ambassadors, 6,000 parliamentarians. Japan has 18 ministers, 18. The United States has 13 ministers, among which only one is known, the Secretary of State. People don't know the others, and they do not care much about knowing the other minister. But it seems to work, and there are powers, you know, they're superpowers, and it's working for them. So 18 ministers for Japan and 1,500 for Africa. And the result is there. We're spending a lot of money to entertain those ministers, to give them cars and bodyguards and houses and residence and everything. It's time to cut on that, you know, by having a continental government. And then I said that for Pan-Africanism, the biggest trap we have is to engage in a discussion pro-capitalism, pro-socialism. It's frankly a non-relevant debate for us. What is important is Pan-Africanism. Yes. Once we are a Pan-Africanist, then we can sit down and talk. Now, be socialist, be liberal, that's your problem. But what is of interest to me is, are you a committed Pan-Africanist? Do you want African people to reunite and to work for the Renaissance? Now, if you do it under the orientation of liberalism, that's your problem. Socialism, that's your problem. Maybe tomorrow when you have a United States of Africa, a federal state, you will have 2 big parties, a socialist party, a liberal party, and they can alternate in power, and who cares? We want our people to be together, and then we'll talk about the rest. I will not mention his name, because I respect him a lot. He said that how can we have a union government of dependent African states? Because some of us receive, you know, budgetary assistance from the colonial masters. So my president replied, said, you know, this is the good reason why you should not oppose a union government. Because if you were united, Senegal will be your country. You have powerful resources in your country. And I'd rather get assistance from you than get assistance from friends or from anybody else outside of Africa. If we were to put our resources together, I'm sure you have something you can take away from my country but as a brotherly or sisterly country, and that's no problem. So if you want to change things around, it is time to speed up the unity process, and you will see. I'm ready to write to France tomorrow, say, keep your money, because I have money with my brothers, and we are together. So everybody was laughing and applauding, and I think they were right. That's the main issue. You know, things, we lost this balance, and some countries, you know, when they tell you that the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, is potentially the richest country on earth, and you see what is happening there. People are entertaining conflicts, war. As soon as we can, you know, get one part of the country to get in a peaceful state, then some people find a way to start something in the north or in the east or in the west. You know, I truly believe, and I told President Kabila, and I told one of his ministers, the African Renaissance, the best test of African Renaissance is the way we will stabilize Congo. You know, Lumumba, when they killed Lumumba, they knew exactly what they were doing. Because a powerful, you know, subcontinent like DRC will be a driving force for the whole continent of Africa. And will be all of a sudden called the richest continent on earth. So they have to keep Congo down, keep the people of Congo down, to entertain war in Congo, and to divide the whole continent of Africa. So it's nonsense that we take budgetary assistance from outside of the continent. We should have been, with African solidarity, using our potential. We, you know, there was time we were self-sufficient in food. Today, you know, receiving food from abroad is a shame. A country like Morocco, when the King Hassan was coming to power in 1960-61, the country had one university left by the colonial power, one university. And they were importing all their food, most of their food, 80%. When he died in 1999, he left 27 universities, and Morocco is now exporting food. To me, it's enough to judge this leader. Was he doing, did he do well or not? You know, we can discuss some of the issues, but taking those two criteria, you see that he did a good job feeding his people and educating his people. And then all these infrastructures, the roads, you know, the highway, the toll roads and everything. So I'm saying we have the potential to do it internally. So, you know, I understand your question. I think it's very embarrassing that African state, at this stage, 47, almost 50 years after independence, still getting some help from the European Union, agricultural assistance, food assistance. And we have, you know, if I start talking about all the potential in agriculture in Africa, Africa can feed the world. We have everything that, you know, it's a whole different discussion. We'll have it one day, you and me. Thank you, brother. Now, the question was raised, if we have 24, among which 9 are still posing a few conditions, but they are ready, and 15 who are ready to sign tomorrow, why not even take the 15, meet in a capital city, sign the Constitutive Act of the United States of Africa, and leave the door open to the rest? Now, the problem, some said that Africans are so, in French we say subjective, you know, like they get angry easily, say, so those 15 want to do it themselves and they don't want to go with us, it's their problem. So they will resist to show that the 15 were wrong. You know, instead of realizing that those 15 countries are doing well, economy is improving, circulation, you know, free movement of good and people, instead of realizing the good, they will see the bad. They will see the discussion, the polemics, and, you know. So some of our leaders have said, no, wait, let's see if we can get as many as we can. But me, on behalf of President Wade, I already told several head of states that there will never be a day in the history of Africa where the 53 African head of states will come at the same level of realization that they should sign tomorrow the Constitutive Act. That day does not exist. There will necessarily be a group of African countries that will sign, that will start, and the others will join. That's how they did it in the US. That's how they did it in many federations in the world. That's the way perhaps we'll do it in Africa. But the other problem of Africa is we have to invent our own model of federalism. We'll not, like, say, the US did it this way, we'll do it that way. The Belgians did it this way, we'll do it that, you know, or the Swiss, or the Russian, or the Indian. I like the Indian model for several reasons. Because of the language differences. We have a lot of language in Africa, which is a plus. It's not a sense of, it's not a proof of, it's not an evidence of poverty, it's an evidence of richness, if you have all these beautiful languages. But, you know, Europeans decided to call them dialects, not language. They are full languages, extremely rich, you know. So if you are blessed with those languages, it's no problem. But then our ancestors find a way to communicate among themselves. The Mandingo Empire covered all these West African countries. They were speaking Mandingo, but also Fulani, speaking Hausa, speaking Jula, speaking other languages. And they survived together, so they knew. And a true African actually should not speak one language. Should speak at least 5, 10 languages. You know? And, our computer is strong enough and well formatted to take 5, 10 languages. And you should teach your children several languages. Mine speak generally between 3 and 4, and I will put 2 or 3 more languages because they will survive to that and they will be rich. So I believe we can get somewhere. Now the problem is, let's see what Addis Ababa will give us as a result. But if truly there are countries that are ready to do everything to prevent Africans to unite, then the others who are ready should do something.
Thank you.
And I hope you will be with us. Now, the sister said we have a lot of Pan-Africanist movements who call for African unity, but we are not united among ourselves. Because there is another Pan-Africanist meeting somewhere in Dakar, and she's right. I was invited to that meeting, invited to this one, and at 11 I had a meeting here in the university, another Pan-Africanist meeting. But you see, in French we say le foisonnement. If things are bubbling, you know, Pan-Africanism is coming back forcefully, and our people are meeting everywhere. As long as they do not oppose each other, but they complement each other, it's wonderful. So let's meet.
There you go, there you go.